First and foremost, let me say I really appreciate everybody here. Some of y'all came just because you knew I was going to do this, and that's a little bit of pressure. But I told Bud just before this evening that I always feel a little bit of pressure, but tonight I really feel a lot of pressure. Um, for a lot of reasons. One, I chose a lot of material. I want to talk about the book of Luke, the Gospel of Luke, because it's the Bible book this year. And there's a lot of good stories to tell out of the Gospel of Luke. But I'm not real good at going deep, but I really like hitting the high points. And I appreciated Travis this morning when he spoke about the persistent widow. And I mean, that's one of my favorite stories out of Luke. And it's what I am. I'm persistent. I just keep on trugging. And so I really appreciated the depth that he showed. And I hope I can do a little bit of a contribution to just your overall understanding of the Gospel of Luke. I kind of want to try to help y'all think about an hourglass where, it's got a big ball at the top and it comes down to a skinny area and the sand or salt goes dripping through and goes to the bottom. That's kind of how Jesus was. He had been prophesied for 1,000 years before. In fact, some people say in Genesis 2, he was the snake that bites. I forget how that goes. But, he was talked about throughout the Old Testament. But now in the Gospel of Luke, it all comes together. And there's going to be a lot of stuff that he likes to be identified with. And so I'm going to try to do a good job. First and second or third or fourth, whatever number I'm on. Luke says this was a letter sent to this guy Theophilus. And nobody knows much about him. But he was kind of a big deal, I guess, because Luke was a doctor. And he wrote him two gospel or stories about the church and about Jesus Christ. Luke being the first and Acts being the second one. And by the way, disclaimer, Acts is also a Bible Bowl book. He sends this letter to Theophilus, and he talks about I'm just kind of gathering all these stories that I've heard from lots of different sources, and I'm writing them in an organized way so that you will be confident of what you believe. And isn't that what we are here in the 21st, second? Which century are we in? 21st century. I always get that confused because it's 2023, 2024, and boy, I'm showing how confused I am up here, aren't I? He wanted to make sure that Theophilus, and by organization, us, knows about Jesus Christ and knows how important he is. And so he starts off with talking about the birth of John the Baptist foretold, and then the birth of Jesus foretold. And then he talks about Mary going to her cousin Elizabeth and saying, wow, you're pregnant. However old she was an old lady. And it was just, you read that story and it's just so powerful. And then Mary sings this song of praise, and it's been created into what is called the Magnificat. And it's just a pretty song. And I was hoping Crystal would be here tonight and she'd sing it, and I wouldn't have to talk so much. But and then the birth of John the Baptist. Everybody knows the stories about, the angel Gabriel comes to talk to his dad while he was ministering in the temple and says, "You're going to have a baby," and Zachariah says, "How's this going to work?" And Gabriel says, "You're not going to talk for 9 months now." And but then when John is born, they name him John instead of Zachariah, and then Zachariah can talk, and he tells the prophecy and tells how the angel told him to name John the Baptist John. And I don't know the significance of that, but there's a lot of stuff in the gospel that I'm not going to be able to answer, but I'm going to hit some of the high spots. Then the birth of Jesus Christ is recorded, and we're talked about, and the shepherds out in the field, and the angels coming to worship him. And I'm sorry, I have the residuals of a cough, but it shouldn't be contagious or whatever. Then they take Jesus to the temple on the 8th day, and what's going on there, and then they take him back to Nazareth, and he comes back when he's 12 years old. And one of the things that just is so powerful to me is, again, all of this was foretold historically, and everybody knew some of what was going on. But Luke feels the importance of telling it again, because that would confirm the stories of Jesus is the Messiah. And one of the very first verses I ever memorized was Luke 2:52, and Jesus increased in wisdom and in stature and in favor with God and man. That just shows how intertwined Jesus was. And Jesus was all man and all God. And here we've been talking about that for 2,000 years, and I don't know about y'all, but I still don't understand how that works. Jesus is God and Jesus is man, and yet we worship him. Then chapter 3 talks about John prepares the way for Jesus, and again, John is prophesied all throughout the Old Testament as preparing the way. And then the genealogy, there are 76 people that are the son of, and eventually Jesus. But it's always cute when I'm reading through it or listening to it. It says that Jesus was supposed to be the son of Joseph, but we all know he was the Son of God. Then it talks about John the Baptist being preparing the way, and he went out into the desert and he preached a baptism for the repentance of sin. And we always get kind of specific as to what that difference is between the baptism of Jesus and the baptism of John, and I don't understand all of it, but again, repentance for the forgiveness of sin. That's what I want. I want to be forgiven for all the stupid things I've done, and John brings it about. Then we talk about the temptation of Jesus. There's 3 classic temptations, food and power. And there's a third one, I forget. But Jesus responds with Scripture every time. And then he begins his ministry. And the first thing he starts doing is being rejected by his hometown. He's rejected by Nazareth. And if any of y'all watch The Chosen, that it's a TV series, and I don't want to advertise it too much, but it's great. But when they show this particular part, they've got him out on the edge of a cliff, and Jesus says, "Not now," and he just walks straight through the crowd. Some things in that TV series, The Chosen, are just so powerful, and that's one of them, in my opinion. And then Jesus preaches in the synagogues. Chapter 5 comes up. Jesus calls the first disciples, and then he starts cleansing lepers and healing paralytics and different people. But he calls Levi. And, excuse me again, Levi is so powerful story. Jesus is walking by and he sees Levi sitting at a tax booth and collecting taxes for the Romans and stuff. And Jesus kind of looks over at Levi and says, "Follow me." And Levi just shuts down the tax booth and locks up and gives the centurion the key and follows Jesus. And that's just so powerful. And I think, again, how does that affect me? There are very, very, very few things that most of us can remember just doing on the spur of the moment that worked out. I got married, most of y'all know, 2 weeks and 9 hours after I met Gayla. 2 weeks and 9 hours. That's kind of the spur of the moment. But it's worked out. And, Levi didn't know who Jesus was. He didn't know, but he followed him, and it's worked out. And here we are talking about it 2,000 years later. There's a lot of stories that Jesus says, "Follow me," where he talks about take up your cross daily and follow me. After chapter 5, it goes into a lot of teaching. And some of those teachings are follow me, and your faith has healed you, or your faith has cleansed you. There's like 9 different times Jesus uses the phrase, "your faith has," and it just is so powerful. There's lots and lots of teaching, and I want my faith to be strong enough to heal me and forgive me. Another classic early education memory verse is what we call the Golden Rule. It's in Luke chapter 6, verse 31. "As you wish that others would do to you, do so to them." King James and authorized versions and stuff, those are a little bit different, but ESV is, "And as you wish others would do to you, do so to them." Isn't that how life ought to be? But man, is it so hard sometimes because we want it my way. And taking off of that, judging others. "Judge not, and you will not be judged. Condemn not, and you will not be condemned. Forgive, and you will be forgiven. Give, and it will be given to you. Good measure, pressed down, shaken together, running over, will be put into your lap. For the measure you use, it will be measured to you." I call this the, I forgot the word. What do you call it when the kumbaya, when you do something for others and it gets done to you? Anyway, that's what this verse tells me is, it's what you do to others comes back to you. And boy, now I'm going to be really messed up because I'm trying to remember that word. Terry? Karma. Karma. Thank you. Who said that? Tom. Thank you. Um, there's a lot of teaching, like the parable of the sower. You know, he goes out and he throws seeds, and some piles in this kind of soil and that kind of soil, and he treats it differently. You know, there's 4 different kinds of soil. Some is really good soil and it produces 100-fold. Some is good, it sprouts, but no water and no depth of soil, and it doesn't work. Some gets trampled on because it's on the pathways, and the 4th one was weeds and stuff, and it gets choked. There's 11 different. It is written all kinds of different ways that Jesus teaches about how to live a healthy and useful life, and I just think that's one of the powerful things of Luke. But this is one of those crazy things I don't understand. I don't think I will ever understand why Jesus would tell people, don't say anything about this. 3 different times he told the apostles that he was going to Jerusalem to be crucified. And the very first time he said, and he strictly charged them. Strictly is a pretty big word. Strictly charged them and commanded them to tell this to no one, saying, the Son of Man must suffer many things and be rejected by the elders and chief priests and scribes and be killed and on the 3rd day raised. I don't know why he didn't want them to know that. At the Transfiguration, he didn't want them to tell anybody until he was, raised. But he did. And there's at least 5, 6 times he, in different ways, told people, don't say anything about this to anybody. He even told miracles, did miracles, and told the person being healed, don't tell anybody. Of course, one of the big things that is in the Gospel of Luke is when Jesus feeds 5,000 people with 7 loaves and 2 fishes. That number may be in Matthew, actually. 5 loaves and 2 fishes. But I don't know how that worked, you know. And again, if you've watched The Chosen, they do it really cool, and it's just a way to explain miracles, and miracles are by definition unexplainable. This is another story that Jesus says his disciples, John specifically, said, we saw this guy performing miracles in your name, and we tried to tell him to stop, and he wouldn't stop because he wasn't with us. And Jesus said, well, I already told the story, but Jesus said to him, do not stop him, for the one who is not against us is for us. And that, I got to kind of step aside and tell a whole story about myself. When I was a kid and grew up in South Texas in the 60s, there were a lot of hellfire and damnation churches, and I grew up in one. And I wanted to be a hellfire and damnation preacher. So I moved to San Antonio, Texas after high school to be a hellfire and damnation preacher. And I grew up with the concept, and it was actually said that if you're not in the Church of Christ, you're less than a Christian. You know, you got some understanding to work on. And I never understood that. But Jesus in Luke chapter 9, verse 50 says, Do not stop him, for the one who is not against us is for us. And I'm taking that to the bank nowadays. The parable of the Good Samaritan, again, one of the classic stories that Jesus talks about. He sets up this analogy to where, a guy gets robbed and beaten and his clothes were stolen and all kinds of stuff. And a Pharisee comes by, a scribe, and then a Samaritan, not even a Jew, but he comes by and he sees the guy hurting, so he puts him on his own animal, takes him to the inn, and bandages him up, and puts oil and wine. Fred can tell us, that sounds to me like antiseptic and ointment, but he took care of him. And he paid the innkeeper money and said, if you spend more on him, when I come back, I'll pay you more. So, it's just a good way to treat people. Excuse me. And I want to live the kind of life that I read about in the Gospel of Luke. The one that Travis talked about this morning, the persistent widow. Again, I had already chosen to talk about that before Travis called me up and asked what I wanted him to preach about. No, he didn't call me. But, this is what Christianity is all about, in my humble opinion. Persistently doing the right thing. And even when it doesn't work out, doesn't look like it's working out, doesn't feel like it's working out, keeping on praying for the right things to work out. And so I really appreciated how he handled it this morning. Then the last third of the book, there's the history and the setting things up. Then there's the teaching, and the last third or so is the going to Jerusalem for his trial, his torture, his crucifixion, his death. He knew what all that was going to be, because he was all God and all man. But the last third or so of the book is him talking about going to Jerusalem. He was passed back and forth between Pilate and Herod, and then Pilate turned him over to be crucified, and then the crucifixion story, and he ultimately dies, and he's buried in a tomb, and then the resurrection. And the road to Emmaus story is only in Luke, and but it's a powerful, powerful story. Again, I don't understand how it happened. I don't understand how Jesus walked half a mile with them, or 7 miles, however long it was. Emmaus is 7 miles from Jerusalem, and he walked with them some of that, and they didn't recognize him. But as soon as he broke the bread, their eyes were opened, and they recognized him. And then he appeared to his disciples somewhere else, and back in Jerusalem, and then he ascended into heaven. It's a long story, and this is part of why I was real anxious to talk about it. I didn't know how much time I'd be using, because I've had a lot of stories I wanted to tell, and I didn't know how long I'd be taking for each of them and the total, but that's it, and the lesson is yours. And if you want to know more about Bible Bowl, talk to me. Or Kathy.